Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to wait for someone to finally see your worth? You pour your energy into your work. You show up, day after day, doing the heavy lifting in the shadows. You give your best, hoping that eventually someone will notice. But instead, you watch others advance. You see people who are louder, people who seem to do a fraction of the work, stepping into the spotlight to receive the praise, the promotions, and the applause. And there you sit, feeling entirely invisible. It is a heavy, quiet kind of pain. The feeling of being left behind. The frustration of believing that your efforts do not matter unless someone else validates them. But what if the thing you are desperately trying to hold on to, the craving for exposure and recognition, is the very thing stealing your peace? What if your suffering is not caused by the fact that you are unseen, but by how tightly you are holding on to the need to be seen? If you have ever felt stuck, anxious, exhausted, or invisible, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see this pain forever. In Buddhist thought, there is a deep understanding of why we suffer. It is not the circumstances of our lives that hurt us the most. It is our attachment to how we want those circumstances to be. We suffer when we hand the keys to our happiness over to things we cannot control. And there is nothing more unpredictable and uncontrollable than the opinions, the attention, and the recognition of other people. When you wait for others to validate your work, you turn yourself into a prisoner of their attention. You place your self-worth in a fragile vessel and hand it over to a crowd that is simply too distracted to carry it carefully. Imagine a solitary candle burning brightly in a quiet, empty room. It does not withhold its light simply because no one is there to see it. It does not dim itself in frustration, waiting for an audience to walk through the door so it can begin its job. Its nature is to burn. Its nature is to illuminate the space it is in. The light is not a performance. It is a presence. Now, think about your own life. Think about the energy you spend comparing your journey to the carefully curated milestones of others. Think about the silent resentment that builds when your quiet dedication goes unrewarded at your workplace or in your relationships, while someone else's loud boasting is celebrated. That resentment is natural. It is a deeply human feeling, but it is also a heavy burden. Ask yourself, right now, are you working to grow, or are you working to be seen? What are you afraid will happen if the applause never comes? Will your skills suddenly vanish? Will your dedication mean nothing? Is this constant craving for validation bringing you peace, or is it feeding your fear? Pause, breathe. Let the heavy feeling of being ignored rise to the surface of your mind. Observe it. Look at this feeling without judgment, but do not let it become your identity. You are not your lack of recognition. You do not have to chase what is completely out of your hands. Do your part, then release the outcome. Stop trying to force the door open. Let life meet you where you are, knowing that your inherent value is never measured by the volume of your applause. Because peace is not something you chase by running toward the spotlight. It is something you make space for in the quiet. But letting go of this need for an audience is only the first step, and this is where the next truth begins. What if the spotlight you are chasing is not a source of warmth, but a blinding distraction? Here is the truth few people want to face. The recognition we crave from the world is almost always an illusion. We believe that if our work is acknowledged, if our name is spoken in rooms of authority, if our efforts are finally praised, we will feel complete. But the spotlight is narrow, it is fleeting, and it casts long, cold shadows. The tighter you hold on to the desire to be seen, the more you suffer. When you watch a colleague receive the promotion you quietly worked for, or when you scroll through the endless highlight reels of others finding success, while you feel stuck in the same place, a deep ache begins. You start replaying conversations in your head. You wonder what you did wrong. You begin comparing your uncelebrated reality to their highly visible victory. You start to believe that because your work is unseen, it is fundamentally flawed. You begin to alter your authentic path, simply to seek approval. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us to look past the surface of things. It reminds us of the undeniable law of impermanence. The applause of a crowd, the praise of a manager, the attention of the world. These things are like the wind. They change direction without warning. They come and they go. If you build your house on the shifting sands of public approval, you will always live in fear of a storm. Imagine a lake reflecting the night sky. When the wind is fierce, the surface of the water becomes restless. The water thrashes, trying to reach up and grasp the light of the moon above. But in its frantic, desperate movement, the reflection is shattered into 1,000 broken pieces. The lake loses its clarity because it is fighting its own nature. But when the wind dies down, when the lake simply allows itself to be still, it perfectly reflects the entire sky. It does not need to reach upward. It does not need to shout. It simply holds the light effortlessly in its own quiet depth. We do this in our own lives. We thrash. We hustle for approval. We exhaust ourselves trying to prove our worth to people who are entirely focused on their own reflections. We feel constantly behind in life because we are measuring our depth by someone else's ripples. Think about that. Ask yourself, are you twisting your life out of shape just to catch someone's eye? Are you sacrificing your inner peace for a fleeting moment of external praise? Is this thought bringing you peace or feeding your fear of being left behind? Pause. Breathe. Notice the frantic urge to be noticed. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. You do not have to chase what is completely out of your control. You do not need to prove your existence to a world that is too distracted to pay attention. Stop trying to force the water to be still. Simply stop stirring it. True value is not created under a spotlight. It is forged in the silence. It is built in the spaces where no one is watching. Because beneath every desperate reaction, beneath every pang of envy, is a fear waiting to be understood. The fear that you are running out of time. And this is where the next truth begins. Section 3. Measuring your worth by another's clock. What if the anxiety of feeling left behind is simply a trick of your own mind? Here is the truth. We live in a world obsessed with speed. We are told that success must happen early, that progress must always be visible, and that if you have not reached a certain destination by a certain time, you have somehow failed. You look at your peers. You see them celebrating milestones, securing new titles, and moving forward while you feel anchored to the exact same spot. The panic creeps in. You start trying to control timing. You worry heavily about the future. You measure your quiet, steady progress against the loud, rapid advancement of others. You begin to believe that your clock is running out and that your unseen work is a sign of your inadequacy. But Buddhism reminds us that comparison is the root of a very specific kind of suffering. When we measure our lives by the timeline of another person, we blind ourselves to the reality of our own path. We suffer because we are violently attached to an artificial schedule. We try to force the seasons of our life to change before the weather is right. Imagine a tree standing quietly in an ancient forest. An oak tree does not look at the delicate fern and feel a sense of failure, because the fern unrolls its bright green leaves in a matter of days, while the oak takes decades to build its thick trunk. The oak does not rush its roots. It does not feel insecure about the height of the towering pine next to it. It simply grows according to its own deep nature. It stands through the harsh storms, quietly expanding beneath the soil, completely trusting its own unseen process. Yet, in our modern lives, we refuse to trust our roots. We scroll through social media and see the brightly blooming leaves of everyone around us. We feel a crushing pressure to succeed right now. We feel a deep, heavy shame for still figuring things out, for still building our foundation in the dark, where no one can see it. We try to force our own branches to grow overnight, and in doing so, we completely exhaust our spirits. Think about your own life. Ask yourself, who wrote the timeline you are trying so desperately to follow? What are you still holding on to that no longer fits the reality of your journey? Are you rushing your work just so someone else will finally notice you? Pause, breathe. Observe the thought of being left behind without following it. Notice the urge to rush, the sharp sting of comparison, and simply watch it pass like a cloud drifting across the sky. Let the storm pass without becoming the storm. You do not have to chase a destination that was never meant for you. Your worth is not measured by your speed. Your value does not expire just because your journey takes a little longer to become visible. Let that sink in. You are exactly where you need to be to build the strength this season requires. But realizing that you are on your own timeline is only part of the journey. Because to truly find peace, you must stop listening for the crowd entirely. And this is where the next truth begins. Section 4. Letting go of the craving for applause. What if the applause you are waiting for is actually a cage? Here is the truth. The loudest rooms are often the emptiest. We spend our entire lives auditioning for people who are not even paying attention. We desperately want to be recognized. We want the manager to notice our extra hours. We want our friends to see our sacrifices. We want the world to look at our efforts and say that we finally matter. And when they do not, a crushing emptiness sets in. We try harder. We become exhausted people pleasers, bending and breaking our own boundaries to fit into molds that were never made for us. We cling to relationships, titles and situations that drain our spirit simply because they occasionally throw us a tiny scrap of validation. We live in constant fear of being ignored, equating a lack of attention with a lack of worth. We start to believe that if our work is not loudly applauded, it simply did not happen. But one of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is understanding the profound danger of attachment to praise and blame. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that suffering arises when we try to hold on to things that are, by nature, impermanent. Praise is perhaps the most impermanent thing of all. It is merely a breath, a sound, a passing thought in someone else's mind. When we attach our identity to this fleeting praise, we become entirely dependent on it. When the praise stops, we collapse. Non-attachment does not mean you stop caring about your work. It means you stop letting the unpredictable reactions of others dictate your internal weather. Imagine a bird trapped inside a completely open cage. The heavy iron door is unlatched. The wide, boundless sky is right outside, waiting to be explored. But the bird does not leave. Instead, it sits on its little wooden perch, singing frantically, waiting for its captor to walk by and offer a crumb of praise. It believes that its song is only beautiful if the owner stops to listen. It trades the freedom of the entire sky for a momentary glance of approval. We do this in our modern lives constantly. We trap ourselves in invisible cages at work, in our families, and in our social circles. We wait for someone to tell us we are good enough to fly. We exhaust ourselves trying to perform for people who are entirely focused on the bars of their own cages. Think about that. Ask yourself, whose applause are you waiting for? Whose permission are you seeking to feel proud of your own efforts? What are you afraid will happen if you simply stop performing? Is this endless audition bringing you peace, or is it silently feeding your anxiety? Pause. Breathe. Observe the heavy need for approval without judging yourself for feeling it. Let the craving rise and let it pass. Stop trying to force someone else to see your worth. You do not need to chase what is already yours. You can step out of the cage whenever you choose. Because true peace is not found when the crowd finally claps. Peace is found when you realize you never needed the crowd at all. But stepping out of that cage means finding an entirely new reason to do your work. And this is where the next truth begins. What if the most beautiful thing you ever create is something the world never even notices? Here is the truth. We have been conditioned to believe that effort is a transaction. We are taught that we put in the hard work, and in exchange, we receive visibility, praise, and reward. When that reward does not come, we feel cheated. A quiet resentment builds. We start to withhold our best efforts. We begin to do just enough to get by, saving our true energy for the moments when someone important is finally looking. Think about how this shows up in your daily life. You stop putting care into your tasks because your manager is completely distracted. You lose your passion for your craft because your efforts are not receiving the attention they deserve. You start to believe that an action only matters if there is an audience to witness it. You tie your personal excellence entirely to the presence of external validation. And when that audience is absent, your spirit goes entirely hollow. But in Buddhist thought, there is a profound emphasis on mindfulness and living fully in the present action. It teaches us to practice non-attachment, not just to people or things, but to the outcomes of our labor. True peace is found when we stop living in the future, waiting for the reward, and start immersing ourselves in the present moment. When you wash a bowl, you simply wash the bowl. You do not wash it to be praised for a clean room. You wash it to honor the act itself. The value is not in the recognition. The value is in the presence you bring to the moment. Imagine a solitary wildflower blooming high on a remote, rocky mountain peak. It is miles away from any path. No traveler will ever walk by to admire it. No one will ever take its picture or praise its delicate shape. Its bright petals open to the morning sun in complete and total silence. But the flower does not withhold its color because it lacks an audience. It does not decide to stay closed simply because no one is there to applaud its beauty. It blooms because it is in its nature to bloom. The act of reaching for the light is its own complete reward. Now look at your own life. We spend so much time acting like flowers, refusing to open unless a crowd has gathered. We shrink ourselves at work, in our quiet hobbies, and in our personal growth, because we feel entirely invisible. We forget that the quality of our work shapes our own internal character, regardless of who is watching. Think about that. Ask yourself, if you knew with absolute certainty that no one would ever see your next effort, how would you do it? Would you still pour your heart into it? Are you building a life to impress the crowd, or are you building a life you can be proud of in the dark? Pause, breathe, return your focus to the task in front of you. Do your work because it is yours to do. Let the feeling of needing an audience rise, and then gently let it go. Stop working for the eyes of others and start working to satisfy your own soul. Because when you stop needing the world to see you, you finally become visible to yourself. But what happens to all of this quiet, unseen effort over time? It does not simply vanish. And this is where the next truth begins. What if the obscurity you are sitting in is not a tomb, but a place of profound creation? Here is the truth. We are deeply afraid of the silent, unseen phases of our lives. When our efforts go unnoticed, when we are passed over, when our daily sacrifices are met with total silence, we feel buried. We look around and see others basking in the warm sunlight of success, effortlessly receiving the very things we have been quietly working toward. The isolation feels heavy. We begin to mistake this quiet period for complete failure. We convince ourselves that because nothing is visibly changing on the surface, all our hard work is simply dying in the dirt. But Buddhist wisdom offers a very different perspective on the unseen. It teaches us about the quiet necessity of waiting and the illusion of the surface. In Buddhist thought, the visible result is only a small fraction of reality. Much of the actual transformation happens deeply beneath the surface, far away from the light of external validation. We are reminded that true growth almost always requires a long period of darkness, Imagine a small seed planted deep beneath the heavy, cold earth. It is completely surrounded by darkness. It receives no praise. It cannot see the sky, and no one walking above even knows it is there. The weight of the soil presses down on it from every side. But the seed does not panic. It does not look at the blooming flowers above ground and feel a sense of crushing inadequacy. It does not try to claw its way to the surface before it is ready. Instead, it uses the quiet and the dark to break open. It does the grueling, invisible work of pushing its roots deep into the ground. It knows, implicitly, that if it rushes to the surface without a strong root system, the very first harsh wind will completely destroy it. In your own life, you are often sitting in that same dark, heavy soil. You are putting in the extra hours at your job. You are quietly carrying the emotional weight of your relationships, or you are diligently building a skill when everyone else is distracted. You feel totally invisible, but you are not being left behind. You are building your root system. The resilience, the patience, and the inner fortitude you are developing in this uncelebrated space are the exact things that will anchor you when the winds of change finally arrive. Think about that. Ask yourself, are you trying to force your way to the surface before your roots are truly ready? Are you fighting the quiet phase of your life because you are terrified that the world has forgotten you? What if this invisible period is not a punishment, but a necessary preparation? Pause. Breathe. Let the heavy feeling of obscurity rise and simply observe it. Stop fighting the dark. Let the quiet season do its work. Do your part in the shadows, and then release the timeline. You do not need to pull yourself out of the ground to prove to the world that you are growing, because the strength you build when absolutely no one is watching is the only strength that will hold you up when the world finally looks. But to truly find peace in the dark, you must shift your focus away from what you are lacking and look at what you are giving. And this is where the next truth begins. What if your deep exhaustion comes not from how hard you work, but from what you are secretly expecting in return? Here is the truth. When we feel invisible, we slowly start to treat our lives like a transaction. We begin to weigh every action, every extra hour, every kind word, and every quiet sacrifice against the amount of praise it returns to us. When the ledger is unbalanced, when we give heavily but receive no recognition, we feel completely drained. We become resentful. We start holding back our true abilities. We convince ourselves that there is no point in giving our best to a world that refuses to say thank you. We stop contributing and we start demanding. But Buddhist wisdom teaches a profound lesson about the nature of giving and suffering. Suffering arises the moment an expectation is tightly attached to an action. When we act solely to be recognized, our energy is entirely focused on our own craving for attention. This craving acts like a heavy wall, blocking our connection to the world around us. But when we shift our focus from what we can extract, from a situation to what we can offer it, the heavy burden of the ego simply falls away. True peace is found in selfless action, doing the right thing, the careful thing, the beautiful thing, simply because it needs to be done. Imagine a river flowing steadily toward the vast ocean. The river does not stop at the edge of a dry field and demand that the soil thank it before it provides water. It does not pause its current because the trees on its banks fail to applaud its movement. If the river decided to stop and wait for recognition, it would immediately lose its life. It would become stagnant, dark, and toxic. The river stays pure, powerful, and alive precisely because it never stops flowing. Its entire purpose is to move, to nourish, to give. It does not flow for the praise of the forest. It flows because that is its deep, undeniably true nature. Now, think about your own quiet efforts. You are the river in your workplace, in your home, and in your community. when you organize the chaos behind the scenes, when you silently support a struggling peer, or when you bring order to a project no one else wants to touch, you are providing life. But when you become bitter and withhold your gifts because you are not being heavily celebrated, you are the one who becomes stagnant. The resentment poisons your own waters. You stop flowing. Think about that. Ask yourself, are you withholding your best self because you are waiting to be paid in applause? Are you walking into a room thinking only about what recognition you can take from it, instead of what value you can bring to it? Is this quiet resentment protecting you, or is it simply making your spirit bitter? Pause, breathe, observe the urge to withhold your effort. Let the frustration of feeling unappreciated rise, but do not let it close your heart. Stop keeping a tally of your sacrifices. Pour your energy into your work as an offering, not as a transaction. Because true freedom is found the moment you no longer need the world to thank you for being who you are. But to give freely, you must first stop fighting the reality of your current situation. And this is where the next truth begins. What if the greatest source of your exhaustion is not your current situation, but your endless, violent fight to escape it? Here is the truth. We are addicted to the word when. We tell ourselves that we will finally be happy when our work is recognized. We will finally find peace when we get the promotion. We will finally feel worthy when we are no longer invisible to the people around us. By living entirely in this imaginary future, we completely reject the present. We look at our current, uncelebrated reality, and we deeply resent it. We feel stuck in a waiting room, desperately trying to force the heavy door of the future to open before it is unlocked. This constant rejection of the present moment creates an unbearable tension in the mind. Buddhism teaches that much of our suffering comes from a simple, tragic habit. We argue with reality. We want things to be different than they actually are. We believe that if we just fight the present moment hard enough, if we just worry enough, we can somehow change it. But rejecting the present does not change it. It only drains your spirit. True acceptance is not giving up. It is not resigning yourself to failure. Acceptance is simply dropping the war with reality. It is acknowledging that right now, this is exactly where you are, and that is okay. Imagine a small boat moving through rough, dark water. A frightened sailor caught in a sudden storm will immediately panic. They will grab the oars and paddle frantically against the heavy current, trying to force the boat back to a calm shore that is already miles away. They scream at the dark sky, demanding that the wind stop blowing. And in their desperate, violent fight against the ocean, they completely exhaust their own strength, making the boat even more vulnerable to sinking. But a wise sailor knows you cannot fight the ocean. You cannot command the storm to stop. Instead, you accept the weather. You stop rowing against the current. You pull in the oars, stay centered, and ride the heavy waves with steady, quiet focus, trusting the boat to hold together until the water naturally calms. We do this frantic paddling in our own lives constantly. We watch someone else advance, and a storm of panic hits us. We try to row aggressively against the reality of our current situation. We exhaust ourselves trying to prove our worth, trying to force the world to see us, trying to manipulate our environment so we do not have to sit in the uncomfortable, quiet phase of our journey. We burn out, not from doing our actual work, but from fighting the ocean. Think about your own life. Ask yourself, are you exhausted from your work, or are you exhausted from constantly fighting where you are right now? What are you afraid will happen if you simply stop struggling against the current? Is this endless fight bringing you peace, or is it just making you sink? Pause, breathe, observe your desperate need to be somewhere else. Let the feeling of being stuck rise, and then let it gently pass. Stop trying to force the locked door open. Stop fighting the ocean. Accept this quiet season of your life exactly as it is. without needing it to change immediately. Do your part, then release the outcome. Let life meet you where you are, because peace is not found by finally arriving at a new, heavily applauded destination. Peace is found the moment you stop hating where you currently stand. But how do you truly know your own worth when the room is entirely silent? And this is where the final truth begins. What if the only person who ever truly needed to see your worth was you? Let us return to the heavy, quiet pain we spoke of at the beginning. The deep exhaustion of watching others advance while you stand in the shadows, waiting for your turn in the light. For so long, you have carried a very painful belief. You have believed that your hard work, your love, and your quiet sacrifices only become real the moment someone else acknowledges them. You have outsourced your self-worth to a noisy, distracted world. But, as we have seen, the spotlight you were chasing is an illusion. The timeline you were measuring yourself against is a cage, and the applause you craved is only wind. Buddhism teaches us that ultimate liberation comes from realizing that everything you are desperately seeking outside of yourself is already glowing quietly within you. You do not need to hunt for validation in the external world, because true peace arrives the moment you become the silent, loving witness to your own life. Imagine a vast, ancient mountain. Sometimes, the mountain is bathed in brilliant, golden sunlight, visible to travelers for hundreds of miles. People stop to point at its peak and marvel at its size. But other times, heavy, dark clouds roll in, completely obscuring the mountain in thick, grey fog. To the people in the valley below, the mountain has vanished. It is entirely invisible. But the mountain does not care about the fog. It does not panic when the sun goes away, and it does not desperately try to blow the clouds away to prove it is still there. It does not shrink or lose its height, simply because no one can see it. Its majesty is not dependent on visibility. It simply stands, grounded and completely unbothered, knowing its own immense weight. You are the mountain. Your long hours at work, your patience in difficult relationships, your steady dedication to your craft, these are your deep roots and your towering peaks. The fog of obscurity does not erase your value. When the world is too distracted to see you, it does not mean you have vanished. It only means you are in the fog. You must learn to know your own immense weight, even when the valley is completely silent. Think about your own life. Ask yourself, can you be brave enough to witness your own journey? Can you look at your unseen efforts, your quiet struggles, and your daily resilience, and finally say to yourself, I see what you did today, and it is enough. What would change if you stopped waiting for the world to notice you and simply decided to notice yourself? Pause, breathe. Let the heavy burden of waiting for recognition fall completely from your shoulders. You no longer need to audition for your own life. You no longer need to wait for a distracted manager, a distant friend, or a fleeting audience to hand you a permission slip to feel proud. You can stop running toward the spotlight. You can let the people around you advance at their own pace without feeling like you are being left behind. You can sit quietly in the dark and trust the deep roots you are building. You can do your beautiful, invisible work simply for the joy of doing it well. Because true recognition is not something you receive from a crowd. It is a quiet respect you cultivate for yourself in the empty rooms where no one else is looking. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. Peace was never outside of you.